okay, I know we were really down on MotoGP last year, but look, this is 2024. It's a new era. Marc Marquez is in blue now. We're all going to figure this out together as a family, right?
Dre, why does that bike have a diffuser on it?
Welcome back to Motorsport 101.
You know, maybe my optimism was somewhat misplaced. Hey everybody, welcome to episode 497. We're going to ignore my small counting of decimal points in last week's set of episodes. It didn't happen, okay? Let's just say we're making up for those 2 episodes that never saw the light of day. It's a counting error. We'll go with that. If it's good enough for the Cricket World Cup, it's good enough for me. Welcome to episode 497 of Motorsport 101. I'm your friendly neighborhood host, Dre Harrison, and welcome to this next three-headed monster I like to call season preview season. It's that time again. We barely got a break to begin with, and yet we're back talking about the big three we cover here on Motorsport 101. And first up, fresh out of a test in Sepang over the last 72 hours or so, it's MotoGP coming up first, and we have a lot to break down over the next hour and a half or so. It almost feels like a preview for what could be an even crazier 2025 in a sense. We'll get into more of some of those vibes as we go into the show itself into detail. But yeah, it's going to be a wild one. But first, of course, we have our wonderful slate of guests as ever. First up, Mr. RJ O'Connell. Hello, RJ. How's it going?
How's it popping, everybody? I do miss the warmth of Daytona Beach. I really am missing it about this time. Only just a little bit more winter to go. That's it.
Say that like we aren't going to get murked by a snowstorm on Tuesday.
Hey, what? Oh, are you kidding me?
Seriously?
No.
Okay, that's. I hope not. And of course, as you could probably already tell by now, that's Mr. Cam Buckley. How's it going, Cam?
It'd be going better if that bike over there didn't have a blown diffuser on it.
You seem to be really insistent about this blown diffuser, aren't you?
Why does it have a diffuser, Dre?
I don't know. It's an aero
and that's
thing
just
now.
one piece of the aero extravaganza that was the 2024 Sepang test.
Yes. And we'll also be going to sprinkle in a lot of the dialogue and the talk about what happened in Sepang over the course of our full season preview as we go team by team. And we'll get into that quite shortly. But just to let you know a little bit about our upcoming plans, I'm going to let you on a couple of little secrets here. First and foremost, the next 3 episodes are going to be all lengthy season previews. I'll also have written accompaniments by yours truly on the Motorsport 101 website, motorsport101.com. Check us out on there. And yes, I will be voicing over all of them as well. I'm not going to have lungs by the time we get to March, but the things I do to sacrifice for this show. But yeah, episodes 497, 8, and 9 will all be season previews. MotoGP is up first, likely F1 next week, and then IndyCar the week after. We're giving Dale Coyne every possible chance to name their 2 drivers before the season starts.
Sign Jack Harvey. Sign Jack Harvey. Do it. Do it for the brand.
Do it for the brand and hope we get the pink version of Jack Harvey back, not the one who was in Rahal Letterman Lanigan Racing.
We speak
also,
not of it.
It never happened. Also, I love that in our chat, Jason says, quote, your Patreon pledge will fund Dre's throat transplantation. Thank you very much. I'm glad it's going to a good cause, I'll have you know.
Keep sipping that tasty H2O during the voiceovers for that.
Indeed. And at the end of that triple head-up block, we'll also talk a little bit more about our special 500th episode. Yes, we have been keeping score at home. Episode 500 is due out the first week of March. Yeah, 500 of these. We've done nearly 500 episodes, and I've been here for, about 450 of them. This is our 10th year of doing Motorsport 101, so yes, it's inevitable we'd eventually get to this point, and yeah, more about that in 499, but yes, it is coming up real soon, so we have got something special planned for it. We're not going to give it away just yet, but do stay tuned. If you want to follow us in other places, by the way, you can follow us personally on Elon Musk's failed business investment, at Dre Harrison 101, at RJ O'Connell, and at C Buckley 917, motorsport_101 for the show itself. I promise I'll be tweeting on there a little bit more often here and there, because it's more fun that way. You know, I can hide behind a giant purple logo.
Hey, don't forget as well, like, Blue Sky's open now.
It is. Anybody can get on Blue Sky. That's something I might have to consider at a certain point. We'll have to wait and see.
I'm already there. So if you wanna come like yell at me for stuff that I don't feel like putting on Twitter, come say hi.
Yeah, indeed. I'm on there. You could
just skate to your heart's content over at Blue Sky.
Skeet indeed. You could also back us financially on. That was a Freudian slip. You could back us also financially on Patreon, patreon.com/motorsport101. $5 gets you early access to all of these episodes before they go live to the public. You can also back us at the $10 level to get access to listen to these episodes live as they're being recorded, as Jason is doing in the chat right now. Thanks, Jason, for listening in. Also, the podcast is on Instagram as well, where some of our reels go up. You can take a little bit of highlights from our shows every once in a while as well. We stick them on
highlights of our shows now. This is crazy. This is exactly, I don't mean to sound like Cat Williams, this is exactly what we've been wanting this whole time.
Oh, yeah, 100%. Massive thanks to my partner in crime, Gloria, for helping out on that front. She's done a fantastic job helping out on that one. Love you, Gloria. Much appreciated. And she's been helping us out with that. And she's done a tremendous job with that. So you can check us out. They get posted all the time on our Twitter, Instagram pages as well. There might be a TikTok coming soon. If I can get a full-time job and buy some equipment, there might be a TikTok coming soon. Just throwing that out there. Don't look for M101 Podcast on TikTok. No, there's not an account there waiting for you or anything. Anyway, all that in to put that to the back burner for 1 minute. Let's get into, right after this, our 2024 MotoGP blown diffuser. Sorry, season preview. We've got to clean up a couple of things first and foremost from a technical standpoint first. There's a couple of big changes to talk about going into this season. The big one being that, as you may have forgotten from last November when it was initially announced, because it came out the day after the season finished, which was kind of weird timing, but here we are. They've changed the concession system. MotoGP's had one now for just over the last decade or so, and this was the latest amendment to, and I think Cam would agree with me on this one, try to bring the rest of the field back up into play a little bit via what teams can and can't do in testing and over the course of a season. I'm not going to explain the full table. If you want to see it, it'll be on our season preview post on motorsport101.com, but you are ranked according to how big a percentage of the total points you scored in the championship was last season. And the smaller the percentage that is, between 85 and 35, depends on what tier you're in and then how much concessions you're allowed. So, for example, if you're in the A class, like Ducati are the only factory that are in the A tier, because they've scored more than 85% of the maximum points of last season. I believe it was 96 last year, which is quite dominant.
It's okay.
They're allowed. Yeah. I'll compare that to Tier D, which is the lowest tier, which is what Honda and Yamaha are in right now, because they scored less than 35% of the total points. So just to give you an idea of the perspective here, Ducati are allowed 170 test tyres over the course of the season. They are only allowed to test with their test rider, in Ducati's case. Whoop, whoop, it's a sound of the police, Michele Pirro. They can only test on 3 circuits over the course of the season. They are not allowed wildcards, so we won't actually see Michele Pirro at a Grand Prix this year unless there's an injury, which makes me very sad, because we do like Michele Pirro around here. And they're only allowed to have either 7 or 8 engines over the year, and they're only allowed 1 update. If you want to compare that to Honda or Yamaha, for example, who are in Tier D, they are allowed 260 tyres compared to 170. They can have their Grand Prix riders test their bike, which is they're the only tiers that allow this. So they can actually get their Grand Prix riders on a test bike as opposed to their designated test rider. They can test anywhere on the Grand Prix calendar, not just at a limited range of 3 tracks. They're allowed 6 wild cards over the course of the season rather than Ducati's 0. And they're allowed an extra 2 engines and an aero update over the course of the year. They're allowed 2 instead of 1, and they're allowed 9 or 10 engines rather than 7 or 8. So, as we could tell, we talked about it a little bit more at the end of last year, so I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but it's generally designed to bring the other factories and help them back into competition and contention rather than clipping Ducati's wings. Is that fair to say, Cam?
Yeah, because realistically, like, if you are only scoring 35% of the points on hand, you are pretty down in the dumps. And really, as far as factory teams go, it's been quite rare in modern motorcycle racing to see a factory do that poorly. And then 2 of them came along at the same time. Because both Yamaha and Honda were pretty friggin' terrible last year. And yeah, I mean, it also is kind of tuned to where they feel their biggest deficit is, which is, of course, the advent of aerodynamics. Everyone else is allowed to have 1 additional aero package upgrade in the year. The Tier D manufacturers are allowed 2. And as we've kind of learned, as this has sort of played out, we've seen actually the 2024 Honda more publicly than Yamaha. They've been openly testing, both with Brattle and their official riders. And they've got 22 tests scheduled this year to try and right the ship. So they are certainly, let's say, maxing out the rules in terms of testing to try and get their house in order.
And probably for good reason. We'll see how that plays out over the course of the coming years and whether it actually works or not. Honda and Yamaha would both have to score at least 35% of the maximum point total available in order to move up into Tier C, which would restrict them to they would lose about 40 of their tyres. They would no longer have free choice of test rider. They'd be back to 3 circuits to test that, but they would still get to keep their wild cards, but they would also have to be back on 7 or 8 engines, and they would lose that second aero update. That's the difference. I mean,
looking at it, Trey, the testing regimen really it drops down quite heavily as you go from D to C, and then A, B, and C are all really more around how much you can test with your tires and your wild cards. It really is aimed at if you are in major struggles and you're down in Tier D to get you up into one of those higher tiers as soon as possible.
Indeed.
It seems like it's more intuitive than the last bit of concessions, the last concession system that we had.
I'd say so.
I think the thing with the previous concessions is that they were I wouldn't say what you're actually allowed was bad, but it was quite rigid as far as timetable, where if you were struggling, you would have to wait quite a while to get those concessions actually in your favor. In this, it's more proactive.
Yes, I'd say so. The previous system, you'd have I think the rule was you had to go more than 2 years without a dry podium finish in order to be on the higher class of concessions, and then you would get things like 2 extra engines, an extra litre of fuel to burn in races. So you could be a bit more aggressive with your fuel map settings and things like that, basically. This is a lot more rolling year to year, a lot more proactive, and a lot more favorable. So if you have a bad year, you immediately get benefits rather than having to wait 2 to 3 years before you truly reap the rewards of being bad, I suppose, is always a weird way.
And even then, like, you have to be pretty bad to then fall in again into that tier D. Whereas if you're in tier B or C, which is where some of our other manufacturers like KTM and Aprilia are,
Both in C.
You get a bit more than tier A, but it's not a life changer. You get a few more wild cards, period, because in tier A you don't get any. And you get more test tires. That's really that changes how you operate your existing tests, but it doesn't allow you to do more tests, if that makes sense.
I was just thinking, like, how crazy it would be in American sports if, like, you're terrible. Like, let's say you're a Detroit Pistons, but you don't actually get to reap the rewards of picking early in the draft for like another couple of years. That'd be so crazy.
That would be wild. It's like, congrats to 2024 Pistons. You stink. You get the 2027 number 1 pick. Yay! Reasons to be excited.
Hey, they're on a winning streak. Yeah, as of time of recording, they are on a winning streak.
They've won 2 games in a row. What for?
We're currently in the midst of the trade deadline in the NBA. Just imagine being dropped by the Detroit Pistons.
And they're better off without you.
Yeah.
Oh.
And you're better off without them. I don't know.
Well,
it seems...
Dre, hit me with that 2024 MotoGP calendar.
Good idea. Let's do that. Now, there has been one big dramatic change. And that dramatic change is, as we talked about it a little bit on a couple of earlier shows, Argentina has been cancelled.
Hashtag cancelled.
Yeah, it's gone and it will not be replaced. It's a shame. I'm genuinely gutted about this. Argentina is a great track. I do very much enjoy it. It's a great dust bowl, low grip, very quick sort of place. And I think this produced a lot of high highlight moments and a lot of highlight reel moments for MotoGP in general. So I'm kind of gutted it's gone. Javier Milei, the new president of the country, has been a bit of a butcher to a lot of the country's budgets, as the libertarian he claims to be. And he's just taken a lot of money out of sports sponsorships in general, including the funding of the Grand Prix itself. So with that in mind, it can't facilitate a Grand Prix to what they claim is to be, quote, its highest possible standards. There has been rumblings about Kazakhstan and India, as Jason puts in the chat. India is fine. People have spoken to the big name journals like Matt Oxley about this. India is fine. If anything, it's actually getting a bigger budget for this year. So hopefully more marketing and more promotion, and hopefully iron out some of the visa issues they had last year as well.
Well, yeah, as I say, it could only be an improvement from last year, where we had the extensive visa issues to the point where some riders didn't know if they were going to actually be in the country for the race. But then we only got the track inspected 3 or 4 days before the actual race itself.
Indeed. It can only be better than last year.
On the ground. On an operational level, they have to improve that event.
Yeah, Kazakhstan is still on the calendar for those asking for now. Apparently there's been some money put into it, given Google Maps footage. I saw that Simon Patterson of the race put a lot of those out there. Apparently there's been some investment into the track, so maybe it's now going to finally be ready. However, there is one reserve round on the calendar, and it's only in case Kazakhstan goes tits up. It is a race in Hungary, but not where you think. It's the brand new Balaton Park circuit that was finished last year. So if Kazakhstan doesn't happen, Hungary will fit into its slot on June 16th instead. We'll have to wait and see how that plays out. Here's the full calendar and get your notes out, folks. Qatar back in the season opener slot on March 10th after its renovations from last year. It's now back as the season opener, but we do also keep Portimao as well. That will kick off the European leg on March 24th in Portimao. Do love that place. Good fun if it's not dangerous as shit. After that, we have the Circuit of the Americas for round 3 on April 14th. Welcome back to Marquez land. That should be fun indeed. The Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez is on April 24th. RJ's just dropping memes in our chat, and I don't appreciate his distractions right now. But yeah, Spanish Grand Prix at Jerez on April 28th. Then one of the big blue ribbon events on the year, the French Grand Prix at Le Mans on May 12th. Catalonia's moved. That's an interesting one. Catalonia is now in May, on May 26th, as opposed to its usual slot in September. It's now going to be
Day of Classics.
Yeah. Day of Classics is going to be right there with the Indy 500 and the Monaco Grand Prix. Going to be a fun one indeed. There's a rare triple header of motorsports delight on May 26th of the big three that we cover. The Italian Grand Prix on June 2nd at Mugello, followed by maybe Kazakhstan on June 16th. We'll have to see if that passes homologation or not. If it does, it'll be Kazakhstan. If not, it will be Hungary at Balaton Park, making its MotoGP debut. Then we have the Dutch TT at Assen on June 30th, one of the big ones. Always love the TT at Assen there. And then, funnily enough, this is the first back-to-back on the year. It's kind of spaced out the first half of the calendar. The first back-to-back is right here, because then the German Grand Prix at the Sachsenring is back on July 7th before a 4-week summer break. The sport returns on August 4th for the British Grand Prix at Silverstone. Then the Austrian Grand Prix at the Red Bull Ring in Spielberg on August 18th. And then Aragon is back on the calendar. Yes, the full fleet of Spanish land races is back on the MotoGP calendar for 2021. Aragon is back on September 1st. Don't all roll out the red carpet at once. Then we have Misano on September 8th. And then the brutal flyaway leg begins. And
Asia trip.
And unfortunately, it's the same spec as last year. 6 races in 7 weeks through the end of September through to early November. It's going to be absolutely hectic. Back-to-back triple headers. India, first off, again, back at the Buddha International Circuit on September 22nd, followed by Indonesia a week after on September 29th, and then the Japanese Grand Prix at Mobility Resort Motegi on October 6th. I still can't get over that new name. A couple of weeks after that, then is the second leg of the flyaway tour. Australia, the traditional Phillip Island Slobberknocker on October 20th. Then the Thai Grand Prix at Buriram on October 27th. And then Malaysia at Sepang on November 3rd. And then a couple of weeks before the final round of the year at Valencia on November the 17th. It is the joint longest MotoGP season of all time, 21 Grand Prix weekends across 8 months. It would have been 22 if it wasn't for Argentina. May the good Lord help us all on that one. It's going to be a loaded calendar. I mean, gents, any initial takes from that?
I'm very curious about the Kazakh Grand Prix. We didn't get it last year. This feels like an event that where people would be like, just because of where it is in the world, I feel like people feel like, if this dropped off the calendar again, no huge loss. I wanted to see Argentina back. I don't like the cut of this Javier Milei's. I don't like the cut of his jib that he's cutting all this like sports funding. We were all like wagging our fingers at Argentina for taking out their sports rage in IndyCar terms. I have a feeling like, I'm not saying that they should go out and revolt over sports, but it would be very hilarious.
It would be.
Also,
get Argentina back on the calendar.
Also,
range.
Also, we have I just want to go through the rounds that have Moto E events because it's a limited slate. We got Portugal, France, Catalan, Italy, the Netherlands, Germany, Austria, and San Marino as your finale in the shortened Moto E World Cup.
I haven't got the news last a couple of days ago. Chaz Davies, he's back.
Huh?
Well, what's the point if we can't have Chaz, Raz, and Baz all on track together?
God damn it. Ugh. One of these days we'll make this happen. I'm just glad Chaz Davies has found work again. I was watching World Superbikes for a fair bit of last year, and seeing them as a pundit on Eurosport kind of made me sad because Chaz was still more than good enough to be on that grid. So I'm kind of glad Chaz has work, quite frankly. Even if it's in the Moto E World Cup, which is a little bit of an obscure kind of where races not quite good enough to be on the Moto 2 grid ends up. So it's a weird one in that sense.
And in addition, we also got news that we're going to have another support race for the MotoGP round in Coda. King of the Baggers. Bikes that have no idea what a kilometer is.
The Baggers. The Baggers. I watched this at Daytona like last year, and it was some of the craziest racing I've ever seen, including friend of the show, James Rispoli, was out there. Jeremy McWilliams, who is still chugging at the grand old age of, I think, 54 years of age. Big Jezza is still riding baggers for fun.
That's where James Rispoli ended up? That is crazy. I haven't heard that name in a hot minute.
Yeah, Bike Live People's Champion James Rispoli is now riding baggers. I didn't even think he'd get a full Moto America gig. That's what I thought we would end up. But yes, he's actually, I actually undersold Jezza McWilliams' age. He's 60 in April.
He's now old enough to get downgraded to a bronze rating if he was a four-wheel racer. That is crazy.
If he had a private pension, he'd be retiring at the end of the year in the UK, which, again, says a lot about how well it is. But great to hear the baggers is going to be at COTA. Great fun. If you're going to be going down to COTA for that weekend, do watch the baggers. It'll be well worth the price of admission alone. Them bikes are mad to watch race around the track in any capacity.
You've got bikes that have no pretense whatsoever of performance riding, tuned to the gills and then sent around the track. There's a Harley Davidson Street Glide about 15 feet from me in our garage. I can't imagine lean angle on that thing.
Oh, beautiful. Just to get my general thoughts on the calendar out of the way before we get into the teams real quick. Weird, we've got 5 races in the Iberian Peninsula in general. I like Aragon as a track. I think it's one of the best on the calendar. I think it generally produces a lot of good racing, but no one goes to it. It's kind of in the middle of nowhere. So I'm surprised that Aragon's back on the calendar, but it is, for me, the best Spanish round we have in terms of actual race quality. So I'm kind of glad it's back, but 21 races is a crazy number to me.
21 plus 0.5 on each of them because each one has a sprint.
Yeah, the sprint rules are unchanged for this year. So that's still going to very much be a thing. About 50% more actual racing on track compared to the standard calendar. And as the test proved, people are still getting dinged up left, right, and center. More on that as we go through the teams. But look, it's a good, nice, balanced, diverse calendar. I do find it a bit weird that we don't get a back-to-back until July, and then we have 2 triple headers and the flyaways at the back half of the year. I still think that's absolutely crazy that that's even a thing in MotoGP these days. I mean, there is no reason why we need to have 6 races in 7 weeks to close out a season. I think that's preposterous, personally.
I think their feeling is just like, well, these are the only dates we can squeeze it in, and it's either this or we stretch this calendar out to December.
Yeah, I don't like it in either instance. I don't like it, but it is what it is in that sense. So
I'm running out of it is what it is, Dre.
It is. Should we get into the teams?
Let's talk about the teams.
First speaking of running out of it is what it is, the MotoGP teams.
Gas Tech3 KTM is blessed with the talents of not just Augusto Fernandez, as last year's Rookie of the Year by default, but also Pedro Acosta, the reigning Moto2 champion.
Yes, and I wrote some neat paragraphs to introduce all of these teams to you listeners out there, because I know some of you are new, Kim, and I know I've had DMs and messages from people saying that, Dre, I'm going to give bike racing a go this year. Fantastic. I'm genuinely delighted you're on board. We're going to be real with you. It's not quite as fun as it's been in the last few years, but it's still a good time. So we're going to try our best to introduce a sense of culture about all of these teams going forward. And as Jason Crichton points out in the chat, congrats to Pedro Acosta, the 2024 Rookie of the Year, because he wins by default. He's the only rookie in the field.
Hey, he's already bringing home the silverware. Hasn't even turned a wheel in anger yet.
He gets a medal in November. What a guy. He'll be sharing that with Johan de Ruvela in Formula E. So, the Gas team, number 37, Augusto Fernandez, and number 31, Pedro Acosta. You can tell who won the sumo wrestling contest as to who got the number 37 in that team, given Acosta won his Moto2 title with that number last year. Although I do find it funny that the number 1 on Acosta's bike looks very much like a 7. I don't think that was a coincidence somehow. Now, we all know where the excitement is coming from with Tech3. While Augusto Fernandez was a surprisingly capable and consistent rider in his 2023 rookie campaign, enough to make Pol Espargaro expendable, rookie sensation Pedro Acosta is where all eyes will be turning. Acosta's still a teenager until May, but he ran riot in Moto2 last year, winning 7 races. The speed will almost certainly be there right from the start, but can it be harnessed with a huge step up in power and speed? And more importantly, will it get the team off the bottom? Given they're on a KTM, it's hard to argue they shouldn't be getting more out of their current package.
I mean, Dre, let's put in an anecdote about Pedro Acosta. His first race in Moto3, he won from pit lane. Pedro Acosta, he won from starting from the pit lane.
I'll put it in perspective as best I can. Pedro Acosta is the great Spanish hope. If you've been paying attention to bike racing in the last 4 years or so, Spain's kind of gotten their asses kicked by the French and the Italians, respectively.
Which is crazy because we just talked about the fact they have 5 races.
Indeed, and yet Spain...
Not been from a lack of pride.
Sorry, 4. I freaking... The Portuguese are going to send us some emails.
Indeed, and Joan Mir's 2020 world title feels like a very long time ago at the moment. More on that later. But Italy's kind of taken over in most of the classes right now, and Spain's kind of waiting for their next guy. And look, Pedro Acosta, I genuinely believe is going to be a superstar. And on the track and off the track, if you ever hear interviews with him, I love this kid. He gets it. His racing hero is Michael Dunlop, the Isle of Man TT legend. This is a man who knows and loves his bikes. He's wise and mature well beyond his 19 years of life. He understands that the sport needs more entertainment. It needs a showman again because it knows its golden years was baked in Valentino Rossi, who we all know completely embraced the entertainment side of being an elite athlete. I love Pedro. I think he's going to be fantastic. And if the test was anything to go by, he was the fastest KTM of all 4 that were on the grid. And I know from people off the record, they're very excited about this kid. He seems the real deal. And if he is, everyone needs to be on notice because this guy could be about to put Spain back on the map in the future. It's going to be very exciting to keep an eye on Pedro's progress this year.
So what is Augusto? Chopped liver?
I wouldn't go that far.
You know, with Augusto, I mean, he had a very solid, kind of under the radar season in 2023. But that's all. Like, I don't really have a lot to say about his season last year. He was very clean. He kept himself out of trouble more often than not. But so often the gas team as a whole were just there. It didn't help that they lost Pol Espargaro in one of the first practice sessions on the year, effectively for the whole season, given when he came back, he was not at 100%. But they're on a KTM.
They should be better.
KTM, well, that's just the thing about KTMs. They blow hot or they blow cold. And we've harped on them for the last 4 or 5 years for their lack of consistency, where they will show up, they'll have a bike to fight Ducati with. They'll show up the next week fighting to stay in the points.
Tech3 had one bonkers round last season, and that was when Augusto Fernandez finished 4th at Le Mans. And besides that, it was lower end points pretty much the entire rest of the season. It's like KTM's inconsistency, but without the upside that KTM often gives you. It's like, given their talent, given the amount of good people within that team, and I'm a big fan of Hervé Poncharal, generally speaking. He's one of the universally well-liked and respected team principals in MotoGP history. And that's not just Susie Perry's endorsement whenever you watch a TNT Sports broadcast. But overall, I do think this team should be doing better with what it's got. And hey, maybe Acosta's going to be the one that opens the door for that, because the guy is a stud. The guy was top 10 overall speed in testing. And the weird thing is Fernandez's test was pretty woeful. Just couldn't get to grips with the 2024 KTM. Very, very odd. But Acosta openly admitted he could have gone even quicker. He admitted he went wide in turns 8 and 12 on his hot lap, which, by the way, was a 57.2. More on that later. It would have been matching the unofficial track record of Sepang. So Acosta is fast. If he can harness that speed in race trim, and how his hand-to-hand combat's going to be on track, we'll have to wait and see. But if it's anything like his testing slate and anything like his Moto2 reputation, look out. This kid's going to be giving KTM a lot of headaches going forward in terms of
KTM needs another headache with managing its stable of riders. Who would have ever guessed?
Yeah, again, more on that later on that one. Should we get into the Hondas next?
Yeah, I guess we got to. I mean, we got LCR Honda Nets. They are blessed with the talents of number 5, Johan Zarco, who was 5th in the championship on another bike, and number 30, Takaki Nakagami, Taka for short, who was 18th in the championship. We'll get it. We'll talk about this a lot. This is our Honda therapy session. It was not a good time for Honda.
I'm going to hold hands with Cam for the next half hour.
I have progressed beyond the need for therapy. I have simply gone numb.
Given the well-publicized collapse of Honda's performances as a factory, they did pretty well to snag a top 5 rider on the grid with Johan Zarco, leaving Pramac to help in the mammoth task of trying to rebuild Honda. He's the most versatile rider in MotoGP at this point, and he has some experience on the RC213V. But that didn't help when he binned the 2024 Honda on the first day out in testing in Valencia. Taka Nakagami's still here too, but you have to wonder just how useful his collective experience is given his results show he's barely a top 10 finisher on a good day through 2023. Losing the chance to get Ayagura in a couple of years ago may only hurt Honda in the long run. The rebuild starts here.
But it's a rebuild with old dudes. It's normally rebuilds are around young guys. But again, as you mentioned, Ayagura was so fed up of being roadblocked and so fed up with the progression of Honda that he just decided to break allegiances and go a different path in Moto2.
He's left Honda in its full entirety. He's now going to be representing MSI helmets in Moto2 this upcoming season on the speed-up chassis. He's like, get me away from all of this shit, basically. And yeah, his entire season was derailed last year by a wrist injury suffered in preseason testing, which didn't help him at all. He would have likely ridden this bike if he felt a bit better about Honda's prospects. He didn't, which kind of says it all, really. Isn't that right, Cam?
Kind of says it all about what everyone thinks about Honda at the moment. Now, in fairness, and I think we'll talk a little bit about this more with the discussion with the factory team, but it's better. I mean, if you break your bone a little bit rather than completely, it's better. But they're starting from a not great base. The Honda is, and now it looks like, again, like last year, all 4 bikes are going to be on equivalent factory equipment, but they're all learning.
Johan Zarco, right? We talked about his adaptability. I mean, this is the best he's been in a long time.
He's been on just about everything in the field.
He's the only rider in the field that's ridden for 4 different factories in the course of his MotoGP career already. He stood in at Honda when he famously cried wolf and got out of KTM after half a season.
Some say Ryan Eric King has never forgiven him to this day.
No, he hates
the people who say that are Ryan Eric King.
Yeah, it's a long list. But he has ridden for Yamaha, Ducati, KTM, and Honda. So no one else in the field has ridden for 4 different manufacturers. So that's worth something.
It is. I mean, he's talked about this bike feels like it's a solid 7/10 clear of what last year's bike was, which is a terrifying amount of lap time to find in a single off season. The problem is the guy who was a second a lap faster than every other Honda rider now isn't riding a Honda anymore.
So you're trying to tell me they're down the net 3 temps?
Well, it's not great, is it?
It's like a MotoGP version of NBA's plus minus, and now he's down 7. The good news, we found 7/10 in testing. Bad news, the guy that was worth a second the lap is gone. So you're telling me we're down a quarter of a second? Yes, great, good progress, Stein.
When you look across to Taka Nakagami, I love me some Taka.
I do,
but it just feels like the last year and a half or so, he has been the quiet struggler in the Honda camp, where him not willing to take the risk to get the lap time out of the bike that so often spat out the other 3 riders on it last year, that for most of 2023, Taka just rode around anywhere from 14th to 18th and just was taking points by virtue of finishing races and not much else.
We're not getting like to talk about another Taka. We're not getting like the Taka Michinoku that was tearing it up in Japanese junior heavyweight wrestling. We're talking about the WWF Taka Michinoku, whose most famous highlight was getting bonked on the head, getting thrown out of the ring in the Royal Rumble that one time.
Yeah, it feels that way. I mean, Taka doesn't want to hurt himself anymore, especially after the nasty hand injury he suffered in 2022 that nearly derailed his entire career. He's a little bit fortunate that Ayagura's plan ended up derailing, because he almost certainly would have been sacrificed for Agura if that had actually gone through. But he's still here. He's still chugging. He's a bit of their test dummy at this point for Honda. They throw radical setups at him and big parts to see how he feels about it, and then they kind of go from there. He's not really here for top-end results at this point. He's here to help the team develop, and that's a valuable role. It's an important one, but it's not going to be a competitive one, unfortunately.
Yeah,
at this
you already
point
paid Stefan Bradl to do that.
Yeah, and Bradl's an excellent test rider. It's weird that this is what we're talking about. I like Zarco. I've always been a fan of Zarco as a rider. He's a little bit on the reckless side sometimes, but he is fast. That's never been the issue with Johan. And I'm glad he got that win last year, because this window might be very much closed shut after the next 2 years in this Honda camp. I can't think of a better guy in the field to help develop a struggling team than Johan. He's been here before with places like Avintio, and he was on 2-year-old Ducatis. I just hope he's got the patience and the discipline to see this through, because he could reap the rewards if he finds a way to make a breakthrough with this team and bike. It's not slow. That's the one positive about the Honda camp. It's not a slow bike, but it does have its issues. And I think this would actually be a nice way to segue nicely into Repsol, the factory team, about this, because Luke has been talking quite a lot about that in that camp.
It's number 10, Luca Marini, 8th in the championship. And did you know that he's Valentino Rossi's half brother? It's never mentioned. And the 2020 MotoGP world champion, Johan Mir, number 36, who was only 22nd because of an injury-plagued 2023 season. This is well, the Chicago Bulls had to face life without Michael Jordan at some point.
Welcome.
Yeah, unfortunately, the bike is the equivalent of Zach LaVine's contract.
Yeah, the worst in the NBA. Welcome to life after Marc Marquez and the Honda factory team. Nothing was more startling than seeing the Sepang shakedown and seeing Honda's riders not sporting Red Bull energy caps after the energy drink supplier firm bolted to join some other Spanish guy. Again, they did pretty well to bring in Luca Marini given the circumstances, a solid rider looking to break free from the shackles of the frustrating VR46 pecking order, and has made continued improvements throughout his career. And alongside Johan Mir in a contract year, the pandemic world champion of 2020 still struggling to adapt his riding style to an increasingly unrideable Honda. The loss of Marc Marquez is already hitting hard, but it has seemed to prompt the Japanese factory to start pumping out updates to try and recover after half a decade of struggles. But just what could be salvaged from one of the sport's iconic teams? Heavy rumours you'll be seeing a lot less orange and white on the bike this year as well, given that Repsol has pulled some of their funding too.
Yeah, I mean, we see that in their test livery, where now no longer does Repsol, even on these unpainted bikes, have top billing. It now sits on the belly pan of the bike, and it appears that Honda's colors will be the predominant ones on this bike, as their sponsors have bled out of this team. during their fall. And here we come to the factory side of things. Again, for the first time, according to Taka, since 2018, they have not had a meeting with all 4 riders about the state of the bike until this test.
Yikes.
They went 5 years without having an all-hands meeting on the state of the bike.
Correct.
What?
How many cracks was Marc Marquez papering over all this time, man?
He was papering over a hole straight through to the other side of the earth.
He was the piece of chewing gum that was preventing the entire dam from crumbling and flooding the entire West Coast.
Marc Marquez was Twitter's load-bearing Mac Mini.
The only crack that was bigger was the big shows when Vince McMahon was feuding with D-Generation X in the mid-2000s.
Do we gotta bleep that out? Okay, but back on track, folks.
Back on track. So this is Honda in the post-Marquez era. Now, basically copy-paste a bunch of what was said about LCR here. That they think the bike is a pretty significant step up from last year, but that isn't that hard when last year's bike was an axe murderer. And this bike, even though it looks like it has cured some of the scaries of last year's machine, it looks like it does still have significant issues on worn tires.
Rear traction still an issue.
Rear traction is still an issue despite making the bike longer, despite a much more aggressive and much more with the time aero package. Kind of a medley of the greatest hits of all of the worst of the aero trends of MotoGP. We now have serrated rear wings. More on them in a bit. But in all of this, you have a former world champion whose stock was utterly destroyed last season. By this bike. I mean, Johan Mir barely competed last year. Such was the rash of injuries and crashes.
Missed 5 races through injury last year, was 22nd in the championship. And I think only finished about half the Grand Prix on the board overall because he was just beaten up and ground to a pulp by this Honda.
This is Johan Mir. He was the definition.
His championship by being the floor guy.
I was just about to say this. Like, he was the definition on consistency on a Suzuki that, like, it wasn't all perfect, but it had its strengths, and they worked just perfectly with Johan Mir's strengths as a rider at that point in time.
And this bike couldn't be further from that. And again, I wonder, given what's been happening with the bike on long runs, if the more gripped up nature of a test track and running 3 days here, again, masks some of the fundamental issues with the bike's layout. Because we saw this when they first redesigned the bike back in 22, that everyone loved it until they put it on an actual race surface and it was chucking riders at the sky.
Yeah, that's tough. Look at Marini. Like, he got the bag. I don't think it's as bad.
You can't beat a factory bag, and you can't beat factory support.
And, like, it's not the worst hire that you could do when, like, everybody else turns you down and you need somebody to just take the other seat that Marc Marquez once held.
It's a good hire. It's an objectively good hire given the circumstances, especially given, let's be real here, Marquez did them no favors by leaving it until 3/4 of the way through the season to break off his contract.
That and the fact that other riders on the grid were laughing them out of the room with the offers they were trying to have them sign.
Yeah, they got Marini in the end, and I think Marini was frustrated in just being the fall guy. Look, it's a weird one with Marini because on the one hand, he's a good rider. There's no doubt about it. He's gotten better year on year in MotoGP, and he was on the podium multiple times in sprints and Grand Prix last year. The problem is he got
quietly impressive through 23.
Yeah, the problem is he got his ass whipped by Marco Bezzecchi by over 100 points.
I mean, there was points where Bezzecchi was still outriding him with his broken collarbone still healing.
That's the issue. And look, he's a good rider. He's quick. But he's going to be in for a long haul with this bike, and I hope he's got the patience for it because it's going to be a slog for Luca for the next year or so.
It feels like when the Packers replaced Aaron Rodgers with Jordan Love, And it feels just like, is Jordan Love all that much of a big-time talent? Well, we saw what happened, but this is like a whole bunch of different circumstances between being the signal caller for a professional football team and being one of two riders on a bike. I guess. Yeah. I don't know.
I don't know.
I still don't know how I feel about it.
Let's talk about our new American cousins, Trackhouse.
Miguel Oliveira from the United States of America. Raul Fernandez from the United States of America. We got Justin Marks.
Riding the American legend brand Aprilia.
That's right. Forget Harley Davidson. This is peak American heritage. We got it all. We got Justin.
Right over here in this series, we embrace American investment.
You're damn right.
Yes, RNF is dead, and the Trackhouse team, most famously from NASCAR, run by Justin Marks in collaboration with Pitbull, now owns a MotoGP team. And while the gloss of an all-in American Star-Spangled Banner livery and glossy social media team look nice, this is still kind of a middle-of-the-road team on paper. There were casualties internally, thanks to the crypto bro ownership last year, and no matter how you slice it, the team under-delivered given the ingredients in 2023. Miggy has huge upside, but is now in his age 29 season. That can't be real. That's not possible.
What? It is real.
What the hell?
He's 29 now.
What do you mean?
I don't like it.
You have to wonder if that big push is ever coming. Same with Raul Fernandez, who had flashes of his utterly sensational Moto2 form last year, but again, not consistently. But with millions coming in from Trackhouse and factory 2024 Aprilia machinery being used, maybe this is the shot in the arm that everyone in that camp needs. Dre,
by the way,
hit me.
RJ, you first.
I was probably going to get to this point before Dre, because all this sounds very, very promising, the plan that they laid out with the millions coming in from Marks, with the new Aprilia machinery. And then we logged on recently and we learned Davide Brivio is joining the team too.
Massive coup. Massive coup. A lot of people
could not get a better hire if you tried.
For those who don't know, Davide Brivio used to be the team boss over at Suzuki, who won the MotoGP manufacturers title and riders title in 2020 before going to Alpine a couple of years ago, who ended up not quite knowing what to do with him and eventually ended up in their head of their driver development program. He was penciled in to go to Honda for 2024, but at the last minute, Justin Marks came in, gave Davide a blank check and then said, "Welcome to the house." Because Davide Brivio is now their new team boss. And that is a coup. Everyone in MotoGP was like, shit, that's a hire. Yeah, that is a massive... it is. If you'd have guessed 6 months ago that Justin Marks would be in a social media video on a MotoGP Twitter account, arm in arm with Davide Brivio saying, "Welcome to the house," I'd have said, what narcotics are you on? You are drinking ethanol.
Ferrari brand. Well, more on that in our F1 season preview.
What is this team?
Well, what this is the same playbook of how they went about their program over in NASCAR, because if you know a little bit about Trackhouse as a team in NASCAR, they're basically the corpses of about 6 or 7 different teams formed together into a Voltron of, talent from other teams and talent who was fun employed. And Justin Marks made it a point when putting together his NASCAR team, when he took over the primary corps from Chip Ganassi Racing, to go out and get the best that he could, hiring people like Ty Norris, who was instrumental in the heyday of DEI, in the heyday of Michael Waltrip Racing. Sometimes too much. And that is really the same playbook here, in that Justin Marks knows where the talent is, and he knows the right people to slot in at the right time. And he could not have picked a better example, a MotoGP world champion team principal less than 5 years ago to head up this op.
He's a 5-time team champion, Davide Brivio, and he's had 5 riders win world championships under his lineage, and he's a 4-time team champion as well. Davide Brivio is the big winner in MotoGP that people don't talk about when they're compared to people like Livio Suppo and Lynn Jarvis. He is a brilliant team boss. He's one of the most respected and liked team bosses. He's a fantastic people's manager. He knows how to get the best out of people, and he needs it. Like, this is what this team needs. And let's not forget, this is a high upside unit. This is a team that probably should have won the 2020 World Championship when it happened with Frankie Morbidelli and Fabio Quartararo.
Yeah, this entry slot 2 identities ago was like, this is the most exciting team at MotoGP, when it was a satellite Yamaha team funded by Malaysian petrol money.
Yeah. This was a hell of a team. It's a team that has championship-winning caliber people inside of it already. So Justin has picked a great team to invest in, a team that's lost a bit of its shine, no lie, but it's got a lot of tools for potential success. Davide is a fantastic hire. Look, we love Miggy on this show. I have since the days of he was in Moto 3 on a Rebel, and I thought, this kid is special. I do wonder if that really big season for Miggy is ever going to land or not. He's never been more than a fringe top 10 guy overall in his MotoGP career to date, but he does have 5 wins, which is more than half the grid.
Yes, 5 wins, and on his day, he's as quick as anybody. He's a rain god. When the rain comes down, there is very few out there better. And for the first time in a couple of years, it feels like, he might just have the equipment to go out and do something with it, because unlike last year where this team was running parts bin previous year Aprilias to the point where they were actually last year's parts and they were failing and they were burning through them, Justin has cut a check to Aprilia to ensure that he has equal equipment and equal support with the factory.
That's which is just great for Aprilia all around. They're going to have 4 spec bikes on the grid next year. They can all gather data off and piggyback off each other. It's a great move and a fantastic investment of money. It's a shrewd move from Justin, who knows how to build a winning team. And I like everything this team is doing. I cannot speak highly enough of their approach to MotoGP so far. I know for a fact it's blown a lot of people away, even on social media, with its team and its coverage and its outreach. I know people within MotoGP who used to be a part of the series, who used to work for Dorna, who are now in other teams going, if we had half the social media budget that an F1 team does, we'd be able to blow people away with some of the things we can do. And Trackhouse has been slick, classy, and has fully leaned into Americana with this team so far. I mean, the livery is a star-spangled banner in full tribute to Nicky Hayden.
This is what we were promised with Haas in F1 like 8 years ago.
Yeah, this is what we wanted. Like, they've leaned all the way in on the America, despite having a Portuguese and a Spanish rider. But I still think that's very funny.
They're ours now. They're ours now, man.
The Americans have adopted them as their own. Look, I like this team. I want to root for this team. I like everything that Justin Marks has said about what he wants to do with this team. He gets it. And I don't say that about many people in motorsport these days. Justin absolutely gets it from a brand, marketing, social team development standpoint. I like everything he's done in this camp so far, and Davide was the cherry on top. That is a fantastic hire.
I mean, Trey, consider how difficult it has been in the last, in let's say the charter era, soon to be expunged in the short term charter era. How hard it has been for teams to break into the top echelon in NASCAR and consistently compete at the top. He's been able to take a Chip Ganassi team, which was not all that competitive for most of their time in NASCAR, other than employing a certain someone who will not be named. And he's turned them into a championship level organization in under 4 years.
Ross Chastain, your 2023 championship runner-up. Let's not forget. The Melon Man himself was second in the championship. So this is a team that can win at the very highest level in NASCAR. And if they keep playing their cards right like this, I don't see any reason why they couldn't potentially do it in MotoGP in 5 years from now.
He knows how to build teams.
He knows how to build teams. I think, given that Ducati was off the table, I think he's taken the best versatile bike he could have taken to go with him. He's opened the checkbooks. He's prepared to invest, and he's prepared to put money in the right places. I love what this team is doing so far, and I'm excited to see its progress. Good riders. I get well soon to Raul Fernandez. He sadly couldn't take part in the entire Sepang as he had a bit of a high side on day one. Some water on the curbs flung him off his bike, which was really unfortunate and negligent on Sepang's part, quite frankly. They had water on their curbs on day one of the test. But he's okay, thankfully. It's just for precautionary reasons. He pulled out of the test after day one so he can go home and recover. He'll be back for the Qatar test before the season actually starts. So don't worry too much on that front. It's a good team of riders. It's a great team of management. Looking forward to seeing what they could get up to. On the other side of the coin, next on the list is the Monster Energy Yamaha factory team.
Oh, no. Well, they got Fabio Quartararo. He's a world champion. And they got Alex Rins, who's healthy. Man, at least with Honda, like, the disappointment was just explosive. With Yamaha, it just feels like, you know, it feels like you're being put in, like, a headlock. You're being put in a rest hold for 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's like the same personality as the bikes. So, I mean, with Yamaha, there is no excuse any longer. The mission, if you choose to accept it, is simple. Do everything in your power to convince Fabio Quartararo that this team is worth staying with. And he's going to sacrifice probably another 2 years out of his 20s to stay there. You know, the former world champion Frenchman produced miracles last season to challenge for the occasional win, to challenge for the occasional podium. But that is not going to be a compelling reason to stick around with so much movement in the rider market and a world champion chopping at the bit to get back into championship contention. To bring in Alex Rins from Honda, that's a power move. Yamaha now has, I think I'm right in saying this, the best rider lineup in MotoGP. Bar none, full stop.
On paper, but their success ballast is the bike.
Their success ballast is the bike because the bike doesn't generate all that much lap time, and it's not all that rideable, while also not generating all that much lap time, even with the extra power that this new 2024 engine has brought them. Dre, could we see a third year in a row where a world champion bails from a Japanese manufacturer?
Mir in 2021, Mir in 2022, Marquez in 2023. Not much of a choice on that one.
Yeah,
like Mir was more forced than volunteered, but still it counts. Mir in 2022, Marquez in 2023, potentially 2 in 2024 if Herman Mir leaves Honda as well. It could be as many as 4 world champions walking away from Japanese bikes in the space of 3 years, which would be wild. Now, this is a bit of a good news, bad news situation. The good news is the Yamaha engine does produce more grunt in 2024. That has been verified by Fabio. He's happy with the fact the bike produces more power. It's got more grunt in the mid-range, and he likes it because if there is hand-to-hand combat, he's no longer a rolling chicane. That is a good thing. He likes that. And generally speaking, Fabio's been quite optimistic in that Yamaha camp over the course of this Sepang test. The bad news is their overall pace is still startlingly low. They did not crack the top 10 in their quali sims at the end of day 3 of testing in Sepang. They were outside the top 10, and there's no point in talking about how you're better hand-to-hand in combat with more power if you're still going to be qualifying in 12th anyway.
Which is crazy because I always just thought that, like, the Yamaha, all it was missing was grunt. I mean, my impression was that the bike was still stable.
But the problem has been, and really since they've tried to inject extra power into it, is that it's hurt the rideability and the sweet handling characteristics of the i4 bike. And when I look at this versus the Honda, which in the past 3 years has evolved quite heavily, for better and for worse, they're trying stuff. And when I look at the Yamaha, it looks like the bike from 3 years ago with aero stuck on it. That was the issue with the Honda last year, is it looked like the same bike as always, and the Yamaha, to be fair, with aero kind of tacked on. And this bike, once again, I mean, they try aero parts, they take them off, they don't work. This is the first real change to the aero in the couple of years, where now it's got a little bit more of an Aprilia-esque fairing wing, a little bit more in the way of the ground effects pioneered by Ducati and Aprilia, but it's still quite tame. And as they inject power into this motorcycle, the frame is very similar to what it's been from the last couple of years, and they just can't get it to the ground. It doesn't matter how much extra power you give the bike if it can't hit the ground and you're spinning your tire on exit, and then you still don't have enough top end because you're on an inline four, and the V4s just blow past you anyway.
This is like if you're tuning a car in Gran Turismo and you're just like, I want to do all the power upgrades, but give none of the platform transmission or anything like that.
Oh God! Oh fuck! It's the Stage 4 Turbo.
Yeah. It's the Dodge Viper in GT3 of 1,000 horsepower that can't put its power down properly. That's what it feels like. And look, I echo Cam's sentiment. This is the best rider lineup in MotoGP for me now, bar none. They got 2 of the 5 best riders in the world on their machines now, without any question in my mind. But the bike is a sticking point now, and for all the reasons Cam's mentioned, I'm not going to get into that because Cam's spot on with everything he's saying. The mission is simple. You've got to convince Fabio that this is worth another 2 years of investment. And look, I'll give Yamaha this. By the way he's talking, I think Fabio will stay. I do. He seems to like the fact that Yamaha's given him assurances that they're going to be more aggressive in development and that they are pushing hard to try and match his ambition.
And we've seen it. Like, we've seen that they're trying more things. Not so much that they are working, but it's the way that they are working. And this is ditto over across the aisle and the other Japanese manufacturer. There was so much stagnation, really, from the last couple of years that Valentino was there alongside Maverick, where every year they would come out and, the bike looks the same. And it's got all the same problems. They are trying more. They are being more aggressive. For me, the question this year is, this is all well and good. When we turn a wheel in anger, where do these bikes land? Because we know that the riders are not a question, and Rins looked all right on the bike. Certainly, he has had a hell of a past 12 months.
Yeah. He went from being the guy who was the focal point of the narrative of like Honda doesn't need Marc Marquez to, well, actually he's hurt.
Actually, the bike tried to end his career.
Dude, it's crazy. And he deserves better because we've always thought like Alex Rins has that world championship level potential. But potential is wasted energy, as a man once said. And that's not to say that Alex Rins' total career has been a waste. It's just that we need to see more of it.
I just don't know if he has the tools to. And as far as Fabio Quartararo, well, we know what he's all about. His reputation is above reproach. It's wild to me that we're looking at the best rider lineup in MotoGP, and I question if they're going to win a race this year.
I don't think they will. I don't think they will
either.
I think they'll go winless, and I think they're going to be averaging bottom end of the top 10. That's my prediction.
If that's the case, I don't see how Fabio stays. I don't care about tone. I don't know if that man's going to take another year of fringe top 10.
$20
He's too good for it. He's too good for that if he is stuck down in the dumps another year. It's just going to piss me off.
I think Fabio's a sucker. I got a feeling he's going to stay. $20, Cam says he stays.
Ooh.
Y'all want to bet another diecast on it?
I still
You
we still need to decide. We still need to decide which one I'm getting you for last year, you piece of shit.
Look. While we decide that, let's go into what we all came here for. What you're probably all listening to this season preview for. In the word of tragic cliche Duke Nukem, bingo, the motherlode. Gresini Racing, Ducati satellite team. They've got Alex Marquez, and now they have the 8-time champion of the world, Marc Marquez. In the biggest rider transfer story for 20 years, Marc Marquez broke off his gargantuan Honda deal to head to Nadia Padovani's Ducati satellite team in front of all Marquez brothers team. Somewhere, the late, great Fausto Gresini is fist-pumping from heaven. The big questions have already been asked countless times already. Can Marc Marquez adapt to the Desmo Decidi? Is he still good enough to challenge for the championship against the men who've already shaped their careers on it? And will he stick around beyond just the 1 year's contract reads? Alex Marquez already feels like an afterthought. The 2024 MotoGP season centers on this team and its most popular rider. God help us all, the initial impressions seem like he's back.
Well, the Valencia test said a whole lot without saying anything. Giant grin. And
shit-eating
grin. Like a Mitt Romney level shit-eating grin. But pump the brakes a little.
A little bit.
Yeah. God, I miss when Mitt Romney was just like the worst that Republicans could get.
God, there's always a bigger fish. Now, first day of testing in Sepang, not a great start. Marc Marquez rides out of the garage and the bike immediately breaks.
He pretty much lost a full day of testing to that. Mechanical problems on day one.
But since then, it's gotten a little
Pretty
better
good.
and a little better. Hasn't really done a lot of work on the time attack, which I think makes sense because in his own words, he's having to unlearn 11 years of blasting the front tire into the pavement on the Honda because that's how you ride the Honda. You work the front tire. The Ducati is all about the back tire, all about getting it in on the brakes, turning it, not tucking the front, and then blasting out of the corner with that traction and that power that the Desmo Sedici is known for.
Yeah, I was going to say, Marquez gave a very lengthy interview with the press about this after day 2, where he was like, look, I'm riding time attacks, I'm riding on instinct. I'm not used to having this much rear grip, so I've got to adapt my riding style.
It's the Cal Crutchlow problem. It's like, Can you make the back of the bike worse? I'm not used to this.
Right. It's just it's why he openly compared himself to what Luca Marini was saying, because obviously Marini being the new Honda rider was saying, I'm not used to not having the rear of the bike support me, so I've got to adapt my style to being able to make the back of the bike slide around. Marquez is like, I've never had a bike with this much rear grip. I don't have to work the front tire. I've got to adapt a little bit. But his long run pace was competitive. It's up there with the other Dukes. It's right up there from what I could see in time. And I had a chat with Simo about it. And yeah, the signs are promising. He's nowhere near Philly's bike yet.
Yeah, I mean, if this is him not knowing what he's doing, then God help us all. Because, I mean, in terms of raw lap time, it's fairly middle of the road. But in terms of long run pace, both he and Alex were quicker than last year's sprint win.
Yes.
As we know, the GP23 is just objectively a better bike than the 22 was. It was better out of the box. It's a little smoother. It's a little bit more of a flexible weapon than the 22 was out of the gate. But this is now a question of how can he adapt his style overall, really over a lap, because we know how important qualifying is in this era of the aero. But long run's already very good. I mean, long run's already scary, Dre, out of this guy.
It's up there with some, like I saw Peter McLaren's analysis of this for Crash.net, did a great job grouping together some of the 9 or 10 lap longer run pace, and Marquez was right up there with the other Dukes. He's going to fit very nicely into that block of Martin, Bagnaia, Fabio Di Giannantonio we'll get to in a bit. Di Giannantonio looked very quick over long run form, like a lot of reason to be optimistic in the VR46 camp. More on that in a bit. But like Marquez is right there with them.
We saw something we haven't seen for a little bit because the Honda would break the front so quickly last year. We saw Mark do an elbow save, the good old days.
Oh, yeah.
That's crazy.
It's back. It looks like the Marquez of old, and I mean that in a good way.
That's right.
Yeah. And don't forget, Alex was in the 56s in testing as well, and on quali sims. That's very,
we almost
very
forgot Alex Marquez proving what we've written correct.
No, and Alex Marquez has looked... He's taken to the 23 like a duck to water. He looked already in full rhythm with the bike. And he went through the same thing last year where he was gaining seconds on his Honda times of the previous of 22, and he didn't know why. Because he didn't know how to ride the bike. And we saw Alex adapt to that. Really took him about half a season, but he looked very comfortable on last year's Ducati, and this bike is a more comfortable bike compared to the 22. So there is an enormous amount to be optimistic about with Gresini, and they know it because with all the photo shoots with Nadia and then the Marquez brothers, they are out here having fun.
Oh, yeah. They're enjoying every minute of this. They love the attention. And look, I'm delighted for Nadia Padovani. She's a wonderful team boss. She's impossible not to root for in this Gresini camp. And they're enjoying like you can tell with these brothers. If you ever watched Marquez on the Edge and the documentaries he's been in, they are genuinely blood brothers. They are incredibly close. They love each other very dearly, and they've always wanted to ride for the same team, and that dream has finally come true. That they
were robbed of it in 2020, even before Alex turned a wheel in anger because he was slotted out of Repsol as quickly as he was slotted in.
Yeah.
But another thing, Dre, as well, what I love to that point, I think it came out earlier today. Alex was being interviewed if Mark needs help. He's like, he's already too close. I don't want to help him.
The quote was, he doesn't need my help.
Yeah.
Which is a good sign. It's a very good sign that Mark is going to be plugged in pretty much from week one. Maybe not at the full peak of his powers, but he's certainly going to be, I think, competitive from day one. And if Jorge Martin's words were ominous, like he could win in Qatar, and again, there's few riders on the planet faster than Jorge Martin. If he's saying that, then goodness only knows what happens when they get to Kota. Because we all know, Mark.
Don't get too far ahead of ourselves here, but it's hard not to because MotoGP is genuinely better. I don't know if it's just a placebo effect at the time before we got crazy with Aero, but like MotoGP just seems like it's better when Marc Marquez is at the peak of his game, which is crazy for a dominant champion.
He is as box office as any star in any sport.
Agreed.
I could watch the man hot lapping just on an onboard all day because, like supporter of the show, Tony Smith watching Kamui Kobayashi run the Le Mans chicane at Daytona, it's almost hypnotizing to watch the man work on a bike.
Yes, it is. He is the most exciting man in motorsport when he's fully clocked in. There's no one like Marc Marquez in the world, in my opinion, when he's fully loaded. And we've not seen Marc Marquez at 10/10 of his capacity for 5 years, in my opinion. This might be as near as we've gotten to that in quite some time. And it's hard not to be excited about that because the sport's needed him at the top of his game again. It's more interesting, it's more exciting, and the newspaper column inches are thicker when Marc Marquez does well, and the sport needs some of that right now. Oh, by the way, we've actually got 5 more teams to cover. Sorry about that. Next up is the Aprilia factory team, because if anyone knows, we're going in reverse championship order from 2023. We're only halfway through. Aprilia
it's crazy that Repsol Honda was this early, but yes, Aprilia. Yes. Aleix Espargaro, Maverick Vinales. No change here. The bike has a diffuser. There's weird vibes coming out of Noale's camp heading into 2024. On the one hand, you have the expansion and excitement from the satellite team Trackhouse. On the other, the inevitable realization that 2023 was a mixed bag. Yes, you doubled your win count from 2022, and Maverick Vinales finally came good and showed some of that Yamaha pace, but you were overtaken by KTM as a manufacturer, even though you passed Yamaha. The bike also has a diffuser. This needs to be the season that Aprilia needs to push for at least second overall, and backing up Trackhouse with factory gear should help raise their floors. There's questions about the riders, too, who were both free agents at the end of 2024. Espargaro has teased retirement, but may stick around a little longer, and Maverick could still be courted over his potential that he showed in the latter half of the 2010s. There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of questions that Aprilia still needs to figure out, like if you want to keep the blown diffuser on the bike or not.
You can't see it here, but Cam Buckley is thrown his hands to the ceiling, pondering the meaning of life over the fact that the Aprilia has a blown diffuser on it.
Dude,
it doesn't just have a diffuser. It has an exhaust blown diffuser. Somewhere Adrian Newey has the most shit-eating of grins as
That's
he
my
cooks
boy
up
right
another
there.
monster. Yes, if you wanted an emblem, Ducati might have started the Aero Wars, but Aprilia is trying to end them. Bigger ground effect bulges on the bike, bigger wings, fork wings, and an exhaust blown diffuser under the rear fender. What the hell?
This is my boomer take. Like, lately for MotoGP people, it's just like, oh, I miss when teams painted the cars and yada, yada, yada. My boomer take is that motorcycles should just look like motorcycles. They should be smooth shapes. They should not have these ridiculous wings. This is my boomer take, and I'm sticking with it.
I agree. Seeing the Aprilia and having their guys explain on MotoGP social media what an aero rake is, as if F1 hasn't had them for 40 years already.
An enormous aero rake hanging off the back of the bike like a bush.
Look, I'm going to sound old when I say this in my 31 years of life, but my God, I miss when bikes look like bikes. I'm going to be that guy. I miss these days, but look,
I do too.
This is like the next two teams on this list for me, because we're getting to KTM next after this. These are what I like to call teams at a crossroads. Aprilia is in an interesting place from a factory standpoint right now.
Dre, I don't think they're not at the crossroads. They've just been parked up at the gas station at that intersection and have no intention of leaving anytime soon.
No, I mean this team like
jump course.
oh God, like this team, we forget it is such a different Aprilia to the days where they were run by Grassini. And Aprilia effectively walked cold and alone into this MotoGP world with effectively a warmed over world superbike less than a decade ago. And since a deep clean sheet redesign of the bike in 21, their fortunes have completely changed. And you could argue now they are playing with aero that is beyond anyone else on the grid. They and KTM, as they try to dig into their bag of tricks to fight the all-conquering and all-strong Ducati, which is far more than simply just its aerodynamics. The Ducati,
Indeed.
You need a true X factor to overtake it. And, well, the bike has a diffuser. The bike has an exhaust-blown diffuser, and it has two damn fine riders riding it, because Alex Espargaro just seems to get better with age.
He is the only man left on this grid who has ridden a 800cc prototype, the last of which being in 2012, which is weird to say. If he makes it through the whole season clean, he will be third all-time on the MotoGP appearances
That's
list.
not real. That's not real.
That is real. He is a true veteran of the sport, and yet
he's in the 300 start club, RJ.
That doesn't feel real.
I know
for a guy really... that Dre, for a guy who was, as his Suzuki tenure was coming to a close, we were wondering if he was ever going to, if he was just going to fade into the background. And yet these last couple years, he has led the Aprilia surge to the front. He has won races with them.
He has been objectively brilliant for the last 3 years in spearheading Aprilia into the genuine competing team that it is today. He deserves a huge amount of credit for that, because I made a video about it in my old video editing days, the Dre Brief series on the Motorsport 101 YouTube channel. And I talked about it in detail that Alex Spargaro was everything great about this era of MotoGP, because he was an open class guy who was the shining star of the open class era of MotoGP, got a factory gig, had a setback because Maverick Vinales rolled into town, lost his gig, and had to dig Aprilia out of a grave to get it to where it is today. Also, by the way, in case you're curious, there's only 8 members of that 300 appearance club that I mentioned across the 3 classes that we know and love today. Those 8 members are Danny Pedrosa, 306, Jorge Lorenzo. Ironically, the exact same number, 306, between the two arch nemesis of the late 2000s. Thomas Luthi, 323. Alex Spargaro currently on 325. Simone Corsi, who did 20 years in Grand Prix motorcycle racing, on 326. Loris Capirosi's 332, Andrea Dovizioso Ozo's 348, and of course Valentino Rossi's 435 across his 25-year career. So yeah, if Alex Spargaro has a relatively clean season and doesn't have a catastrophic injury of some kind, God forbid, he will be third on the all-time appearances list. Which is wild, given that Alex is still technically only 35 in July. This is his age 35 season.
He's still got time if he wants it, and if he remains competitive.
Yeah. It's weird because he was teasing retirement last year, but he's kind of walked it back a little bit because he's got new friends. He's very close with Maverick. It's a proper family unit now in that Noel faction, which is weird to say about Maverick Vinales, but here we are. He's also very close with Jorge Martin and Fermin Aldeguer, and he likes the fact that he's found some friends in the paddock he can hang around with beyond racing, and apparently it's made him happier, which is nice, I guess. It's wholesome in a sense, but Alex might not retire after all, which is going to be interesting to see what he does, because if Fabio does leave Yamaha, I think these are the favourites to sign him.
Yeah, and ironically, I mean, I suppose the question mark is next to it, because throughout the Sepang test, actually, Maverick struggled quite a lot on this new 2024 Aprilia prototype.
Alex was very quick.
And Alex was bad fast, and really their big sticking point right now is that they were testing on the 2023 engine. We're awaiting the 2024 engine for basically further use, and they were very, very quick everywhere but the straights.
Mm-hmm.
And the straights are where Ducati remains an absolute wrecking crew.
From what I've been told, they severely lack mid-range torque. So it's that
middle of the straight as they're running up through the gears.
Yeah, that third,
just
fourth.
Get eaten alive.
Yeah, it's that third, fourth, around 150 mile an hour kind of zone where they're really struggling.
That's that highway pull kind of shit right there.
I wonder where they go from here, because it feels like they're doing everything right with the bike and they're doing everything right with the rider lineup, because this is an excellent rider lineup. I think top to bottom, I think only second to Yamaha's right now.
Agreed.
Because I just think there's a lot of question marks over Bastianini right now because of the injuries from last year at the factory Duke team. But as they remain so far down on engine power, they need that last step. Like, they're right there behind Ducati, but they can't get over the hump. And that's been the last 2 years. When they try a moonshot with the bike, sometimes it gets them a little closer, and then other times they fall back a bit, and they've got to get that floor up, because last year the floor was a far cry from the excellent consistency that kept Aleix in the 2022 fight.
Yeah. Nothing else. We're far from the days where like upper tier Moto2 prospects are like turning them down, saying, I don't want to make my debut with this team.
Yeah, we're far from the days of them being the worst entity in MotoGP to the point where they were a factory team fighting with claiming rule teams.
Yeah.
I don't want that.
Yeah. It's better when we're disappointed that they aren't like gunning for championships on a consistent basis with the resources that they have.
Yeah, like it's great to see them up here. But I am curious, is it going to be a case of stick or twist for Aprilia? Because if the opportunity to get Fabio Quartararo is there, I'd be very tempted.
Everyone should try. Everyone on the grid should go for Fabio Quartararo.
Agreed.
It's Fabio Quartararo.
The problem is that are you going to sacrifice Maverick Vinales in order to do it? That's a genuinely tough question.
I think that's up to Maverick this year.
Maverick needs to give them a reason not to drop off the wagon.
Alesia's great, but Alesia's old. He should be the guy on paper that you're wanting to move on out of this team, and then...
But it seems like he doesn't want to retire, though. That's the thing. So then it becomes
But he's still performing.
Yeah.
He's a top 5 rider on the grid right now. That's the problem. Like, I got a feeling this is going to end up a lot like Sebastian Vettel in his final year at Aston Martin. It's going to be, make a decision on your future or we're going to have to make it for you. And that's seemingly what this may end up becoming. Because if I'm Aprilia, I'm not sure which rider I'd like to cut bait with if Fabio was on the table. That's a really tough decision. And it might just come down to an age argument because, like I said, Alesia's 35 in July. But Aleix is still riding at an elite level. So it's really, really tricky. Speaking of tricky rider situations, KTM, and this time it's the factory team, the Red Bull factory KTM team.
This bike has a 4-element rear wing and 2 front wings.
Dude.
It's a weird time. Number 33, Brad Binder, who was 4th in the championship last year. And number 43, you know him, you love him, Jackass himself, Jack Miller, who was 11th in the standings last year. One step forward, another step back for the Austrian factory. On the one hand, Brad Binder had his best season yet in MotoGP and was rewarded with another 3-year extension. On the other, winless on the year in Grand Prix and a distant second to Ducati, who beat them nearly 2-1 last year. Brad is rightly still their lead man, but he's now on a 2.5-year dry spell in GP form, when it mattered most last season, he made mistakes that cost him valuable points. And Jack Miller was trying to ride himself out of a job at times last year. This is a team that's made no secret of flashing the cash to try and get up the field and have been radical in making big moves to try and make that happen. This needs to be the year KTM look like a serious contender rather than being a flash in the pan. And if you're Jack Miller, you need to justify your move, or Pedro Acosta, or maybe even Marc Marquez might be coming for your job.
Think about how crazy this would have sounded like a few years ago to say that, like, yeah, KTM is a viable contender to sign Marc Marquez when KTM was properly bringing up the rear just about a decade ago.
I mean, I feel like we could copy and paste the last 3 season previews of KTM in MotoGP and place it here.
They're not they have been at the crossroads for, like I said, they have been at the gas station shopping for drinks and snacks way too long at this point.
KTM, as with last year, as with the previous year and the year before that, they remain blowing very hot and very cold. Basically transplant a lot of what I said about gas here. When KTM are on form, with seemingly no rhyme or reason to it, they have a bike that can fight the Ducati.
Mm-hmm. Genuinely.
They have a bike that is very quick in a straight line. They often top the speed traps here. They are in collaboration with this Formula One team, Oracle Red Bull.
Yeah.
Aerodynamics. I heard they're doing okay in the 4-wheeled world. I think they had a pretty good year last year.
Who's to say?
But it always comes up a little bit short when KTM's ceiling is a bar fight with Pecco Bagnaia, and the floor is a bar fight with the Repsol Hondas.
It's weird with KTM, because like I said...
And there's no pattern to it. The track doesn't seem to matter. The conditions don't seem to matter. Sometimes they will show up and they just cannot get the bike to cooperate.
It's really weird. It just there's no rhyme or reason.
Odd.
There's no pattern of behavior. With Aprilia, they perform best on low grip tracks. That's generally where they've won their races in the last 2 years or so. With KTM, there's no pattern to it. It just either happens or it doesn't happen. And it's incredibly weird that KTM still hasn't got this figured out on a week-to-week, on a track-to-track basis yet. It almost seems like it's setup dependent as to whether they're good or not on a race weekend. Weird.
This bike, though, is quite a different proposition, as they have gone all in. They are a carbon fiber bike now. We have full carbon fiber chassis. The promise of the Decimo Sedici about a decade and some change ago has now been fulfilled, where they now have a hybrid carbon fiber alloy chassis across all of their bikes if their riders want it, coupled to full-blown Formula One style multi-element rear wings, and front wings ahead of slot gaps on their fenders, ahead of fork wings underneath fairing wings, alongside winged ground effect pods on their fairings.
Please. What the fuck are we doing here? Look, here's what I'll say. Brad Binder was stretched to his limits last year as a lead rider. Like, there was a couple of races last year, like Jerez and Buriram, where he was right there challenging for the win. Assen was another one as well, where he's right there challenging for the win, and that's as much as you can reasonably ask of Binder, which, at his best, he is still an excellent, excellent rider when he wants to be.
He was best non-duck last year.
Yeah, comfortably
by a
the best
mile, by an order of magnitude.
Yeah, and by a good 100 points.
Yeah, and Dre, there was points last year. I mean, I say fighting the Ducatis at the ceiling relatively, because you could see what Brad Binder was having to do to the bike to make it do that. There were points last year where he was in dogfights with Pecco and Martin, where he was visibly at 12 tenths, visibly over the limit, and there were times where that bit him. He ran wide a couple of occasions, lost a couple positions on it. There were times where he just straight up impaled people on the front of his KTM. Mm-hmm. He was, and he's typically quite a high floor guy. There was a few times last year where he just threw it all away.
Yeah, the floor fell out from underneath him a few times last year. And his last win was the crazy epic Styria flag to flag in 2021. He's
a genuine act of God.
If Red Bull gets to KTM in the middle of the season, it'll be 3 years since Binder's last win, which is wild for a rider as good as he is. Like, dude, he's got to start winning these.
I think it's very emblematic of KTM.
Who's on the hotter seat, though? Him or Jack?
Jack,
comfortably.
Jack Miller was one of the worst riders in the sport last year, comfortably.
Jack Miller had okay, to be fair, he was becoming a dad, and that probably had something to do with it. His mind was probably elsewhere for understandable reasons. But there was moments in the middle of last season where Miller Lucky was trying to ride out of a job. And
Dre, you took a man who has never seen a rear tire that he hasn't destroyed, and you put him on the bike with chronic tire wear issues.
And sideways, and can go sideways in the hands of the right people. What did you think was going to happen here? It's like it's the story of the scorpion and the frog all over again. It's like, I promise I'm cross river, I won't sting you. And then Jack Miller stings, like, what can I say? I'm a scorpion. And that's what Jack Miller was last year. And look, we all love Jack Miller.
He's a scorpion king. Terramana tequila.
No, we're not doing that. No,
the United Football League, baby.
Oh dear, but no, Jack Miller, he's riding for his job this year. I have
with this volatile, silly season coming up, without question. He might have one of the hottest seats in the sport.
He is the bottom of where silly seasons are going to open up, because every big name is a free agent. This is a contract cycle year, 2024. A lot of the field are going to be free agents. Marc Marquez is going to be a free agent. Fabio Quartararo, Francesco Bagnaia, Enea Bastianini, Jorge Martin, Aleix Espargaro, Maverick Vinales. Jack Miller's seat is going to be a highly lucrative one at the end of this season. They might just bump up Pedro Acosta if he's good on the Tech3. That's a very real possibility.
He looked like it. He looked like it in Sepang.
I think on paper that's the favourite, in my opinion. I think they'll just bump Acosta up to avoid the trouble and just tell Jack, thanks for the memories, off you go. So Miller is riding for his job, in my opinion, this year. So he needs to do something. Is he riding for his
place in his sport? Because it feels like
I think he is.
If he loses this, like, I don't know where else is for it to go. It's like, you better start learning World Superbike.
It's hard because Jack Miller is not slow. That has been the least of his problems. It's the fact that on every bike he's ever been on, he just burns up the rear tires. And that was already prevalent enough on a Ducati that is always superb in working and utilizing its rear tire. You put him on the KTM, a bike that slides, a bike that tends to chew up its tires, and it was a disaster last year. He's been on enough bikes, he's been in enough teams in the sport to think this problem I don't think it's getting better. I don't think that that's going to change because this is who he is as a rider. And if you are a Yamaha looking to fill the seat of Fabio Lees, if you are KTM, who now have a rider dilemma with a superstar in the making with Pedro, with the opportunity, if that doesn't work out, to sign Marc in the silly season next year.
Red Bull would open the checkbook with a blank check and say, do what you need to do to get Marquez here.
Write what the number you want, and we will pay it out. I just don't know what team in MotoGP is looking for a Jack Miller when there is enough names that are going to be moving hands potentially next year, and you've got Moto2 alum coming up, probably.
Furman Aldeguer might be the number one name on the board for Moto2 next year, quite likely, the way current form is going.
If he can maintain what he finished last year with,
going to be a stud.
He is going to be in demand for 2025.
Yeah, his manager is not going to have to hit him with the, hey, you up just to get a ride that's on the decline. There will be just hitting his manager up bro, you up?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey, good news. Yeah.
Yeah, KTM's going to be riding headlong into another rider storm at the end of the year. Brad Binder is a secure part of their future. They've been looking for a number 2 rider for quite some time. And this might be the year they have to make another move to make that happen. And I'm going to be very intrigued to see if Miller can ride himself into or out of employment. It's going to be into, I think anything lower than top 8. And I think KTM is going to be looking for another rider. I think he needs a top 8 at the minimum to realistically think about that. He needs to be mingling with Dukes.
He has to be ahead of Acosta as well. Because I think Acosta's he's going to be too good, too quickly to leave on that gas for too long.
Pit Bearer has no problem making bold moves if he wants to make his team a success. He's had no issue doing that. He will cut bait with you quick if it comes down to it. Into the Ducati section for the top 3 teams.
Everybody is on a Ducati. God, I love it when all the power in MotoGP is concentrated on one bike.
Indeed, isn't it fun? And next up, the new Petromina Enduro. The Petramina Enduro VR46 MotoGP team. Number 72, Marco Bezzecchi keeps his spot. It was third in the championship last year, and they've now been joined by number 49, Fabio Di Gianantonio, who was 12th in the championship last year. This feels like a prove-it year for the VR46 team. They rejected the chance of being a Yamaha customer to stay on Dukes. Good move, even if they're now covered in highlighter fluid. Bez was the biggest surprise of 2023, and when he was on it, he was untouchable in all 3 of his wins. But he likely needs to double that tally to take that next step and truly challenge for the title. Has he got that in him? Across the garage, Digia was a revelation in the back half of last season, with crew chief Frankie Carcecchi unlocking some incredible pace with a man who very nearly lost his job. But he doesn't have Frankie in his camp anymore and likely needs to prove it wasn't just a fluke. Is Uccio's team for real, and will it give the factory team another bloody nose?
Hashtag, why not Bez? The second
Why
coming.
not Bez?
Why not Bez?
Well, unfortunately, these bikes were caught following Jeremy Clarkson's sports train, so the front of them is now yellow.
Oh, yeah. Bit of piss.
And they now get the Exalted, much like Trissini, the Exalted GP23. But this is a prove-it year, it feels like. Marco Bezzecchi was him in the first half of last season, but
incredible.
He was phenomenally good. Just frankly blew the wings off of the field in all three of his wins. But when the ceiling wasn't that high, the floor sometimes dropped out. Unfortunately, when he hit rock bottom, broke his collarbone and spent most of the year riding hurt. That's not something you can really ride through on one of these bikes.
No.
So really his objective,
stay healthy
in the clear now, stay healthy and go into this season with a blank sheet and
stay
go and
fast.
prove that last year was not a fluke, because if he can reproduce what he did last year, he's going to give some factory teams a headache when it comes to riders.
And here's the thing with Bez about the whole prove it thing. Let's not forget, Bez turned down a GP24 to stay with this team. Pramac offered him a job on that GP24 on up-to-date machinery for this year. Bez turned it down to stay with this crew. I hope that was the right decision, because that's a bold move. Like, I respect the size of Marco inverted commas Simoncelli Bezzecchi for the size of his cojones for that one, because I know most people would jump at the chance to ride a GP24. More on that in about 15 minutes. But Bez was him. There's a reason why he won the Motorsport 101 Breakout Star of the Year award last year. He fully deserved it. When he won, he dominated. He dominated Le Mans, he dominated Argentina, and he dominated in India. When he's on it, he is untouchable. And I can't say that about anybody else in this sport besides maybe two people, and that's Bagnaia and Martin right now. He's in that bracket when he's at his very best. I just need to see more. I need to see 5 or 6 more rounds like that this year. And if he does, he'll be in the mix for the championship. No question.
He's got a hell of a machine to try and do it on.
Yeah, he's got a great bike to do it. Maybe he saw something in the 23 that he thought, maybe I like this. But he's got Fabio Di Gianantonio alongside him in the garage this year. And again, we said it earlier on, Sepang test, Di Gianantonio was fast. Very fast.
Dude, it's amazing to think what could have been if he didn't start off his MotoGP career so terribly.
It looks like he's a rider of confidence. And I think he found some confidence with Frankie towards the end of last season. And even though he's not there anymore in the VR46 camp, I do believe he's got Valentino Rossi's data engineer in his camp. Good person to have. Doesn't hurt to have that in your back pocket. And again, I think over 10 laps, over sprint race distance, I think he had the fastest overall average from Peter McLaren's numbers from Crash.net. So Di Gianantonio was lightning fast. Low 57s.
Low 57s is a race pace.
Yeah.
Remember, the track record before this test was a low 57. Now we're doing that as a race pace.
Mm-hmm.
So I think he genuinely has unlocked how to ride one of these big, bad motorcycles. In that end of the season, just flurry of results that he achieved. And now he comes into a team where he gets a fresh start. Walking in here with confidence, but again, he's got to prove it. He's got to prove that the end of last year was more than just a very talented crew chief unlocking him. He's got to maintain it across this year and up against someone in Bez who, as you mentioned, Dre, untouchable on his day.
Yeah.
If nothing else, what I think VR46 really needs is two riders who can compete on a given weekend. Because last year we saw a lot of it was either Bez or Marini.
Agreed.
Almost never the two of them.
Yeah, they only in the sprints did they really have two bullets in the chamber for most of the season. Because Marini was a very good sprinter, not so much in Grand Prix trim. And if they can get Fabio cooking alongside Bez, this could be the best team in MotoGP.
You weren't wrong when you said this is like a white bike just splashed in highlighter fluid.
I told you. Yeah, it's like somebody broke open one of those old 90s highlighter pens over the front of the bike and it's just been stained. And that's what it feels like. It's a very bold livery. I kind of respect the fact they tried something so radically different. But
you know what it is? It's like whatever Nike uses to color their fabrics, the Volt color, it's like they dip the front of the bike in that.
Just the front. Just the front. And it's just faded into white on the way back. It's a very weird livery, but it's a very, very... I think this could be a very strong team on paper. I think they could challenge for the team's title if the GP23 is competitive. I think that,
like, Dre, thank God they did not take the Yamaha check.
Oh, Jesus. Oh, dear Lord.
Someone else has got it. Someone else has got to take that body blow.
I don't care how much of a brand ambassador Valentino is for Yamaha.
You don't have to do this, buddy.
You don't have to do this, and you have the equal best bike in the field right now. Chances are, as we start this season, the 23 is probably going to be a little better than the 24 on recent form before Ducati really unlocks it.
Right.
You get a chance to use that.
And here comes the big factory boys, the Ducati Lenovo team, the factory Ducati with the number one plate. The reigning two-time champion of the world, Francesco Bagnaia, and alongside him, the number 23, Enea Bastianini, who was 15th in the championship last season.
But for a lot of it. So, yeah.
Speaking of proving it.
Speaking of proving it.
The Ducati factory might just have similar concerns when it comes to their riders. We know they're the kingpins of the sport right now. But they're gambling on their GP24 being more, quote-unquote, radical than similar years past. They don't want Marc Marquez as a threat, so this bike somehow needs to be even quicker than in years past. Francesco Bagnaia is the two-time reigning champion of the world, but now has to deal with his greatest challenge yet, a healthy Marc Marquez on his own championship-winning bike. If he can triumph over him and three-peat, we can start talking about an all-timer resume. But across the garage, Enea Bastianini needs to find his 2022 form again, one where he himself was one of Bagnaia's early challengers. And let's be real, last year really wasn't his fault. With Martin, Bezzecchi, and Marquez all having licenses to impress on the same machinery, Bastianini is the job on the chopping block if he doesn't deliver.
I want to see a full healthy season of Enea Bastianini, or at least just give me enough to what's the rate to what's the rate of games that you have to play to qualify for awards in the NBA?
65.
It's 65 games.
65. Give me at least maybe you miss a round due to a free injury. Hopefully that's the worst that it gets. I want to see him fully healthy and really see what we got, because other than that one win,
we were robbed in Sprint 1 last year of Bastianini's season.
Luca Marini tucks the front, collapses into Bastianini on the outside at the hairpin at turn 5 of Portimao, and Bagnaia missed the first 5 Grand Prix of the season. He missed 9... Bastianini, sorry, yeah. And he missed 9 races overall last year because he was, to be honest, probably at least partly responsible for the turn 1 Catalunya plow job that took out 5 Dukes at once. It was a weird time to be alive last year, let me tell you. But yeah, talking about Enea Bastianini, he was incredible in 2022. That was his breakout season. He won 4 times. He was giving Bagnaia a bloody nose. There was 4 or 5 rounds last year where Bastianini was punching with the guy that would go on to win the World Championship that year and beating him on occasion as well. Bastianini, at his very best, can beat anyone in the world today. Fact, we saw it. Yeah.
He has a genuine X factor.
Yeah, he is genuinely got an X factor in him that most riders do not have. He can manage his tires better than anyone in MotoGP when he's at his very best. The problem is, last year was such an outlier that you almost kind of have to throw it in the bin and not count it. Now, I'm a bit nervous because the Ducati camp are adamant he's back to his best. He was excellent in Sepang, in the 56s in testing, very, very fast. But I've always said, Bastianini has always gone well at Sepang. He won there last year. He was second the year before. He loves Sepang. He loves that track. He's openly admitted it's his favorite track on the calendar. He loves the flowing nature of it. I need to see more of a sample size of Bastianini. I'd like, as you said, RJ, I'd like to see him get maybe 18, 19 rounds in next year out of 21 and just see what he's got across the board with a full off season under his belt and some actual time on a GP24 and just see what he's got. Because if he's good, Ducati's got the best lineup in MotoGP, without question. If
he's the question mark, and it's his health that's the question mark.
If he doesn't, then he's out of a job at the end of this year. And
that sucks.
Because I know how Ducati get down. They will replace him because we'll get to Pramac in a minute.
There was already discussion that they were going to last year when, the thoughts were coming out that, if Martin wins, Bastianini's out of a job.
Yeah, and there's already, Jorge Martin in the off-season made it perfectly clear, I want the factory seat next year, ... or else, basically.
Well, somebody else will.
Yeah, so it's all on Bastianini. Look, I can make one bankable statement about MotoGP in 2024. Francesco Bagnaia will win multiple Grand Prix.
That is the coldest take maybe in the history of this podcast.
Bang! Look at me. Listen to the Colin Cowherd podcast every week. No, I'm joking. No. Look,
no, you need to throw in like 7 more divorce references in there before we can get to coward levels.
But amazingly, you can have like a sensible take on Taylor Swift mania and football games. I don't get it. Look, Francesco Bagnaia is
duality of man.
Dude, he's realized all the potential that we thought he would have in him like a couple years ago when very few people were willing to listen. Cam Buckley was speaking the good word about Paco Bagnaia. And now he's realized that. Won more races than anybody else. He won his second straight title. He's got fewer cases of the dropsies.
But he's not free of the dropsies yet. And I do wonder.
Yeah, go on, you first.
I do wonder. This year, he has got the biggest target in the sport on his back. Besides maybe Yamaha's engine guy.
It's a fully healthy grid again. He's got Marc Marquez on his championship winning bike of last year. And touch wood, he's got a healthy Enea Bastianini on the same bike as him, as well as Jorge Martin on the same bike as him.
Jorge Martin, who, if he wants to be something in this sport as far as statistics, he better have learned from his late season antics last year.
What I will say is that this is the toughest field that Bagnaia has ever faced. And the thing is as well, I love Bagnaia. I've given him the benefit of the doubt more often than not over the last 3 years. He left points on the table in both his championship campaigns.
An enormous amount of points in both years.
He's beatable over a full season. There's no argument in my mind that can convince me otherwise. Kevin, I know you're listening to this podcast. I know you're listening, and I'll tell you right now, Bagnaia is vulnerable. There is no doubt in my mind about that.
I think it's a question of getting the floor up in sprints a little bit, because he was devastating in race trim basically all season last year.
But that was his game plan. He was sacrificing sprints to learn the setups.
But what happens if one of the others, whether it's Marc, whether it's Martin, starts rolling the points in both. He can't sacrifice one for the other. Like, you can do that to an extent, but Martin was everything he was with more dropsies last year.
Yeah.
More fire in the head.
And Martin won 9 sprints last year.
But Martin left even more points on the table, and ultimately that's why it was a question of who left less on the table rather than who really kill shot the other down the stretch.
Remember the podium stat from last season? Martin had 8, Bagnaia had 15, and that's what won Bagnaia the title.
Without question. But at some point, someone is going to put together a season on one of these fine GP Decimo Sedicis where you have too much of the grid and too much quality on these bikes. Eventually, someone's going to put together a season where it's a ton of sprint points and a ton of Grand Prix points. That might be Pecco this year.
Yeah, it might very well be.
He's under threat. If 100%. It's not, whoever doesn't is under major threat.
And like I said, there's going to be a queue for Bastianini's seat if he is vulnerable, and if he has another poor season. Martin has basically already given Ducati an ultimatum: sign me or I'll go to Honda. He's got no problem swapping a worse bike.
Good luck with that, brother.
Yeah, and but the Ducati's entire game plan for the last 3 or 4 years has been build a fleet of young, talented riders, and they probably don't want to make the same mistake KTM did, and that was letting Jorge Martin walk. Speaking of which, the team champions of 2023, the first independent team to ever win the team's title in the MotoGP era, Prima Pramac Racing. The number 89 of Jorge Martin in second championship runner-up last year, and then, yes, your eyes are not playing tricks on you, number 21, Franco Morbidelli in the other seat, who was 13th in the standings last year.
Do you ever just fall directly upwards to the moon?
Directly upwards. Dude.
And pure vertical on the axis.
And finally, the reigning team champions, Pramac. Yes, they made history as MotoGP's first independent team champs in 2023, but will be mad the biggest prize of all slipped through their fingers. And remember, they'll be on the same machines as the factory team. No one will know this better than Jorge Martin, who he knew left a few dozens worth of points on the table in a campaign he could have won, arguably should have won. He'll have another go in what seems to be his final come-and-get-me plea to the factory team, having already threatened to walk if he doesn't get his way. Alongside, in another big shock, Frankie says relax, but he's already coming off a struggling Yamaha run and is likely to miss the entire preseason after a nasty superbike crash in Portimao's combined World Superbike test. Not a good start for a man desperate to prove he still belongs at the highest level. Can Pramac really make a push for the big one? Yeah, for those who don't know, to fill in the blanks, by the way, Frankie Morbidelli had a nasty high side in Portimao. It was a combined test with the World Superbike paddock in Portimao. Landed on his head, apparently, had to be medically assisted to hospital. He's fine, relatively speaking, but he's missed the entire Pramac. He's missed the entire Sepang test. He's probably going to miss the entire Qatar test as a medical precaution because it was a head injury. Thank God for once the sport is actually looking out for a head injury, I must say, as a side note, by the way. And yeah, Morbidelli will likely only touch a GP24 for the first time when the actual season starts in Qatar on March 8th.
It never ends, man. Franco Morbidelli, we love this guy. He is the heart, the soul, the conscience of the sport, the conscience that the sport needs. And just a few short years ago, he was good enough, I'd say good enough that if a few things had just broken differently, he would be the 2020 MotoGP world champion. It didn't break down like that, but we never would have expected that the next 3 to 4 years of his career would break the way that they did, with a knee injury that completely derailed his prospects, with a Yamaha bike that was stagnating. He now has this opportunity on a good bike once again, but now he's coming into the year where you potentially worry about him coming off another major injury.
You know, this is like that meme that's been going around for the last couple weeks of ask my landlord to up my rent.
I want to embrace the grind.
It just never ends with Frankie, and it sucks so bad because he is a huge case of what could have been. Runner-up in the championship in 2020. Really, only a couple races earlier from going into that final race, still in contention. And yet, injury after injury after injury.
That knee fucked him up bad, man. It fucked him up real bad, and he's never been quite the same rider since then. In his defense, he was a lot closer to Fabio last year than he was, but it wasn't enough to keep his job. But man, did he land up into a GP24. And I really
Best team
do.
in the field.
Yeah, and he's taken the Zarco role, the experienced veteran who, might still be able to perform on the highest level with up-to-date machinery. And I really sincerely hope he does, because Franco is one of the good dudes in bike racing, who genuinely gives a shit beyond the world of biking. We all root for him on this show. He's one of the genuinely great guys in the sport, and I'd love to see him do well. I'd love to see him win a race again on that Pramac and be up there with the big boys, because he's a great personality.
He was the hyped prospect. Remember, Fabio kind of came out of nowhere.
He was the first real, genuine star out of the VR46 Academy.
Yeah,
he was number one. He was Genesis. He was the first guy to prove that this academy was working when he dominated that Moto2 championship and then came in and almost won the big one, until Bagnaia stole his thunder a couple of years later.
It just feels like we are on a train headed to nowhere, because he just keeps getting hurt. And I don't want to see, I love watching the man ride a motorcycle, but I don't want to see him shorten his friggin' life over it.
I don't.
And I just don't see from here, having now missed the full test that he needs, because this is a brand new bike, again, a very different prospect in terms of engine character and chassis to the Yamaha. He needed all the time he could get, and he just lost all of his time.
Agreed.
Give it a handful of races. We'll see where we're cooking. We don't have to go through all this existential crisis about Jorge Martin. At least that's one thing.
Jorge Martin, why are you the way that you are? As fast as anyone on his day. A bad case of the late season dropsies away from being world champion. Well, you challenged for one. Learn from your mistakes and go challenge for another.
It's that simple. If he cuts out the mistakes, he'll win the world championship. Because I think he's going, if he's at his best, he's going to have to force Bagnaia to ride to 100% of his power. And when Bagnaia does that, he makes mistakes. We've seen the evidence of it. Even as late as Qatar last season, Fabio Di Antonio bullied him into making a mistake that nearly wiped him out. There's an alternate universe where Bagnaia tucks the front and Martin takes a genuine title fight to Valencia, and maybe Martin doesn't have to ride at 11 out of 10 to try and stay alive. It's a very different proposition if Bagnaia tucks the front in Qatar. But even with the mistake, he still took home a safe 20 points, and that's what got him over the line in the end, in my opinion. Now, Martin is fast as hell, but it's weird. He's almost putting himself on his own time limit, and I don't think Martin needs to do this. Last year was proof he doesn't need the factory team.
I think this is just. I think it's just like down the stretch with the title. This is pride talking. This is a lot. I am above riding for an independent. Well, ultimately, an 8-time world champion just bailed from a factory to go to an independent because it's going to be a better fit for him. He wants to win. If you want to win, Jorge, it's on you. You had the ball in your court and you dropped it.
And Gino Borsoi is one of the longest veteran team managers in MotoGP. I think he's been in that camp since the very start of Pramac in, I think, the early 2000s. Like, there are a few more trustworthy people in bike racing than Borsoi running the Pramac team. He doesn't need the factory to win. He's got the bike. He's got a good set of people around.
They're effectively a factory-adjacent team. They
In all
get the
but
same
name.
support and same mechanical package.
Like, just ride the bike and seize the means of production from the factory team. Because as we've seen with Davide Tardosi, and we love Davide Tardosi on this show,
Induce the bullshit.
If you induce the bullshit, Davide can't hide his body language. He did not like it last year when Pramac was giving them a bloody nose. Give them something to worry about. You'll get your factory seat one way or another, right?
This is not the Pramac that was just happy to make up the numbers in MotoGP. No, this is a whole different animal.
This is the best team in the sport, officially. Like, they had two good riders last year.
They were incredible last year. They were cleanly outperforming the factory for most of it.
Yeah, they had two quality riders. Johan Zarco was your floor guy, and he was top 5 in the championship last year. That's fine. That's all you need, because he was consistent. Maybe he wasn't breakneck fast, but he was consistent. And having him fully healthy for a year alongside a fully healthy Jorge Martin won him the team's title. They stayed healthy. They largely kept it clean, and Martin was fast as all hell. Like, I remember, he won 9 sprints last year. Over 12 laps, he is the fastest rider on the planet today. Just focus.
Equivalent to Shinji, pilot the Ava.
Yes.
Martin, ride the fucking bike.
Just ride.
Because last year, down the stretch, it seemed like he was focused on every aspect of the title fight besides riding the damn motorcycle. And it showed. And this, you get one of those. You might not get, you're not always guaranteed a chance at a title. You're on the best bike in the field. Ride the goddamn bike.
In the words of Nick Saban in regards to the time he had Lane Kiffin as his offensive coordinator, run the ball, Lane. Run the ball. Just ride your race, Jorge, and you'll be fine. Just don't do anything stupid. It's been a hard off-season for that. If the evidence is anything to be believed, he's still fast as shit. 56.8 in testing, the second fastest lap of the test. Only Bagnaia, which, by the way, 56.6 from Bagnaia in testing, the fastest unofficial lap ever set around Sepang on 2 wheels.
Oh.
Yep. Turn the old track record into space dust.
I made this point on Twitter. These MotoGP bikes in a regulation book that hasn't changed really in the last 10 years, they are now going 2.5% faster than they were 10 years ago. When Marc Marquez set the pole time at Sepang in 2014 in his record-breaking 12-win season at the time, he did a 59.7. Bagnaia did a 56.6 in this test.
Jesus.
They're 2.5% faster than what they were. That's terrifying.
That's spectacular.
These on 320 horsepower bikes that weigh 160 kilos and have a contact patch
on
about
tires
the same
that are
size.
not fit for purpose.
Tires that are not fit for purpose, and on the contact patches about the same size as this Pokemon coin I'm holding up in my hand right now. It's remarkable, these things, but they also terrify me. Right, a couple of predictions before we get out of town here. First of all, are we going to go for... I'm going to go for non-Ducati wins. How many? Cam says 3. I'm going to say 2. I think Aprilia will still win a couple.
I think
4.
Ooh.
4. Okay.
With the length of the calendar, I could see Binder breaking his streak. I could see Quartararo by force of will manhandling that more powerful Yamaha to wins. And like I said, the Aprilias, both riders have a decent shot to win a race.
Cam's going for the exact prediction of last year because the actual number was 3 last year.
I think Aleix will get a pair, and I think Binder will get one.
That's fair. That's more than fair. I'm going to also say Over or under 6.5 different winners?
Over.
Under.
Ooh.
Strategic under. I like that.
I went under last year and I got it. So I'm going to say 6.5 is a good bar, is a good marker.
I thought we went way over last year.
I think
we had 8 different winners, which I believe was the most we've had in a Premier Class season.
Most since 2016, because 2016 had 9. I think that year was
a crazy season.
That year was nuts.
Wow.
And finally, your 2024 MotoGP World Champion will be...
Okay, y'all. I know we love Marc Marquez to the point that we are self-aware and making fun of ourselves and being the Marc Marquez Love podcast.
Do it. Do it, you bitch.
I think the world champion will be the friends we make along the way.
Bro, enough. That's what I'm saying. Is we thought Marc Marquez was healthy and he was going to manhandle that Honda title, and he didn't.
Yeah, and then that bike had very, very different plans. Sweet Jesus.
I'll get mine out of the way first. I think Francesco Bagnaia three-peats.
All right.
And if you're a betting man, if you can get Bagnaia around 2-1 right now, I think that's a very good price. Please gamble responsibly.
I like the...
You want to take Martin, don't you?
I want to take Jorge Martin. I'll take Jorge Martin.
Take him. Why not? He showed he could do it last year. Why not?
Yeah.
I think it's a very fair shout. Cam?
Come on.
You're taking Marquez, aren't you? You're taking Marquez, aren't you?
I am not taking a dominant Marc Marquez.
No, I don't think he dominates the year.
I don't think he dominates the year. I think it'll take a couple races, but I want to see what that man is like around Coda on this thing.
You know what? I'll pose a bonus question.
Sweet Jesus.
Over or under 3.5 Marc Marquez wins?
Over.
I say under, but his strength will be consistent finishing.
I know I will. You would have to pry me away from the table to bet against them at 2 of them.
Under. I think he'll get 2. I think he'll get Kota in the Saxon ring. I'm not sure where the third win's going to come from. I think Martin and Bagnaia is a bit too strong for me. I think it's going to take Marc about half the year to fully adapt to this bike in race trimming and race conditions. I think that might be a bit too much for him to overhaul the deficit. That's my gut. Next year, I think we could be cooking.
Well, depending on what bike he's riding next year.
Very much so. So I thought I'd throw it as a nice little spicy bonus.
All we know is that it won't be a Yamaha. That's the only thing we do know. It won't be a Yamaha.
The MotoGP season will start up on March the 10th in Qatar. We can't wait. It's weird given that we've been down on the sport for a lot of last year, but this feels like a borderline reset. It's kind of weird in a sense. And it's gonna where Marc factors into this field is gonna be fascinating to watch. And where does he slot in? Is he a Bez? Is he gonna be a Binder? Is he gonna be more a Martin or a Bagnaia? Is Bagnaia gonna hold on? Will Martin learn from his mistakes? Just how good will Aprilia be? And of course, just how wacky will silly season be? I can't wait to find out. We'll be back next week for our Formula One season preview, because my God, the last week has been a crock of shit, let me tell you.
Man, the last week has really been the most incredible year of silly season news we've had.
Yeah,
RJ, it's February.
Yeah, I mean, we talked, one of us talked a lot of smack at the universe about, we got the big scoop out of the way before the recording. And the next week took that personally.
Indeed. I can't wait to see how that's going to play out. We'll be back next week for that. Thank you very much for listening. It's been 2 hours and 15 minutes of fun. I hope you guys enjoyed as much as we have. We're excited. We're hyped. We'll see you on the track in March 10th. Until then, I've been Dre Harrison. They've been RJ O'Connell and Cam Buckley. And until next time, thank you very much for listening. Sayonara. Take care.
Let battle commence.
Can we just make it through the year with a full grid at one race?
Please.
Would be nice.
Please.
Happy 75th anniversary to MotoGP.